we'll start with you, Jack, because obviously you spoke to Anne Rabbit there, and you've had to overcome barriers in most of your adult life after a serious accident. You were an active sports person, your back being one. So maybe speak to us about your journey.
I ended up having a very simple accident on a beach. I used to spend my summers as a lifeguard and instructing windsurfing and surfing, and I had an accident diving into water. Probably the least risky thing that I did all that summer. And I hit a sandbank and I broke the 5th vertebrae in my neck. And look, in a moment, the way that I knew of navigating the world and interacting with life was very dramatically changed for me. And anybody that goes through a significant diagnosis or life-altering injury, or there's many ways that it can take place, you go through a grieving process of the life that you had planned and the way that you knew of interacting with life, and that was very much my case. And you know, there's the bargaining and the shock and denial and the natural dip of depression, and then you come to a phase where you would call it reconstructing, and following that is some level of acceptance. And the reconstructing phase, this takes place over years and decades, you know, really. And I'm 10 years since my injury now, and over those years, it's a case of, yes, it's mental, but it's also physical and so on. And it's involved a lot of trial and error. In the early years, so I have about 15% muscle function. I don't have any finger function or hand function, but I've got sort of wrists, biceps, and shoulders. And my desire was always to find my way back into the outdoors and the sports that I loved. Anybody that runs or plays a team sport or particularly does an adventure sport knows that one of the things that brings you back again and again is finding that sort of flow state. And it was and has been a challenging and very much trial and error based approach to get there. I've done all sorts of things, from silly things like skydiving to whitewater rafting, kayaking. More recently, I took up sailing, and then I do a lot of training in the gym, and exoskeletons were mentioned earlier, and that's kind of my health maintenance piece. But really, that puts me in a position then to get into the outdoors. And the sports that I predominantly have found myself doing now are hand cycling and sit skiing. So I've had to go abroad for the sit skiing, but that's been a really fun adventure over the past 2 years in particular. But the hand cycling has been fantastic for me. And it takes time. We mentioned earlier the challenges in access to equipment. It takes time and trial and error to find the right equipment. But when you do, you know, it just puts you back in the place where you can enter the pain cave again and seek that challenge that I think anybody that's into sport benefits so much from.
So Jack, we see on your Instagram page, check out his Instagram page. It's fantastic. You're down the highways and byways of the roads of Ireland and the hand cycling. What is working in terms of the ground, in terms of participation, access to facilities? What's working, what can be improved?
Yeah, so look, I mentioned earlier that I've been exploring the greenways around the country this summer. Waterford, the various stretches of the Royal Canal Greenway. There's a new one opened up not too far from us, up in Navan. I was down in Waterford, so I'm going to Limerick this weekend. They are amazing. The greenways are just a fantastic amenity around the country. Last year we were in St. Anne's Park, for the Liberty and IWA Run and Roll, an amazingly inclusive event. The atmosphere was fantastic, and the parks around the country are getting better and better in terms of having areas that are reasonably well either paved or have very hard pack gravel, which is also really good for a bike or wheels. And those kind of things make a big difference. one of the big things that makes a really big difference as well is being able to point to a space where you can say, at this stop, I'll be able to use a bathroom, for example. They're considerations that play much more on the mind of an adaptive athlete of different types. For others, it might be the knowledge that they'll be able to get car parking space or get into the restaurant nearby, or these kinds of things. And so having information and signposting about those type of things otherwise become the kind of the small barrier to entry. They're the unnecessary friction, you know, that can be worked around. What's great though is now when you go onto Google Maps, or a lot of organizations and facilities are starting to put little notes up there to say what their access is like, and that's amazing, because first of all, it makes the facilities and amenities more readily accessible for everyone, but it's also good for businesses in the area and so on, because it gets more people out and using these places and spaces.
Padraig, Healy, I learned that over 60,000 people on the island of Ireland are either visually impaired or blind. You're doing work with Vision Sports Ireland. Maybe highlight what you're doing day to day, some of the challenges and the opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely, John. So I guess Vision Sports Ireland, we're a national governing body promoting sport and physical activity for people blind and visually impaired. So we're a multi-sport organisation. And I guess our objective and ambition is to get people to engage in the physical activity. And then the sport and the high performance piece can be a byproduct of that. I think the biggest barriers from our side, it's been mentioned already, but transport is a huge piece. You know, there are over 62,500 people across the island, but again, the infrastructure, you know, we speak a lot about the universal design and accessibility, but if people can't access, so none of our members have driving license, you know, so if you, to be diagnosed with vision impairment, it's logMAR 0.5 or less, so anyone wearing glasses, that's considered corrective vision. So I guess the transport network in Ireland is a huge barrier to our members, and I think when it comes to when we speak of infrastructure and greenways and the sports capital programs and all the developments that will be coming, it needs to dovetail with the transport network. There's great work being done with Rural Link and that, but again, there needs to be more done to support our members to be able to access their local gym, their local club, which is hugely important. But I think the infrastructure piece is part of it. The education is another element, and giving people the confidence to be able to engage with stakeholders, engage with people with disability, and learn and I suppose be able to best design and develop programs suitable to their needs. So like we have a Vision Sports Awareness training course, it's an hour-and-a-half workshop delivered online, and again, it's just trying to remove the fear factor and educating people on the different types of vision impairment. Like less than 5% of the 62,500 have no vision. So the majority of our members would have some level of functional vision, but it's just, I suppose, giving people the confidence to be able to engage and ask, well, you know, what sports, what can you see, how can we support you? And then I suppose just on the video from Leixlip Athletic Club, Lechaela there, like we have a guide running workshop which we've developed with Athletics Ireland in the past 12 months, and also we're working with Cycling Ireland, and we're rolling out a tandem pilot training course. But again, the challenges around volunteerism, and I know that's something Sport Ireland are working and trying to combat, but it's having huge implications on the participation for our members, because I suppose people are very busy, leading busy lives, and so the volunteers and challenges that clubs are facing, are absolutely evident in supporting our members to access physical activity.
Thank you, Padraig. And Benny Cullen, obviously you're involved in innovation, research, maybe where the money's spent through Sport Ireland, but the nuts and bolts of what's going on the ground, what do you feel is maybe not working, that could be working, and what are you excited about?
Okay, well, maybe to touch on some of the other barriers that have come up. We did a piece of qualitative work when we did our diversity and inclusion policy, and the stuff that frequently came up, you know, training, facilities, access. On the access point, I think Padraig's point is brilliant. There's no point in having a universal access facility if you can't get there, you know. So how many of these sporting facilities are on public transport networks that are also accessible? The number of sports clubs that we have that you can't get to by bus is really challenging. Or even, I mean, I'm like Jack, I love the outdoors, but I frequently get to the outdoors. I'm like, how are you supposed to get here if you can't drive a car? You know, so that piece I think is an area to work on. I also think so some of the other stuff, and it's more human stuff, when we spoke, and this is focus group work, so rather than percentages and statistics, when we spoke to people with a disability, they talked a little bit about just kind of human interaction and attitudes. So first of all, they didn't always feel that they felt welcome in sports clubs, you know. Not that it was said, not that it was explicit, but almost this implicit kind of, oh, do I really belong in there? Can I be part of that? So there's a piece there, and it's the first point on the Active Disability Ireland chapter is openness, you know, the openness and promotion. Promote the fact that you're inclusive and be open to people with a disability. And then interestingly, they also talked about their own experience, and kind of linked in a little bit with confidence. And in two ways. First of all, you know, maybe feeling unsure as to whether they'd be able to do it, but also what they expressed was this fear of being a burden, you know, which I found that really hit me hard. I was like, Jenny Mac, you know, you know, we want you involved in sport. And so that's something I think that sport really needs to work on that messaging around openness and welcome. And then the last piece, and it was touched on earlier on, and thanks to Liberty for doing the piece of work, because it's always nice to get these additional bits of research that give us new perspectives and different insights. But one big thing we heard in the focus groups was choice. That depending on where you live in Ireland, you don't necessarily have a broad range of sports that you can engage in. And I think that's even more important if you have a disability, because you might be limited in what kinds of sports. You might want to be sporty and active. You know, Jack was describing, you might not be able to do some of the things that you did when you were younger, some of the experiences you had if you've had an acquired injury, but it's important that people have choice and diversity of opportunity there that is accessible, that has universal design and that is open and welcoming. I think one thing we've done particularly well, and I was involved in it in a previous role in Sport Ireland, it's kind of one of the things probably one of the proudest moments I have in my career was the National Sports Policy gave us the impetus to put a sports inclusion disability officer into every local sports partnership, and I kind of oversaw that. And Padraig was one of our sidos back in the day. That network is so powerful, but sometimes I feel it's the best kept secret in Ireland. You know, I'm like, Janie Mac, you know, if people have a disability, there's a person in every local authority whose job it is to find opportunities for you to get active, find the thing that works for you, help you overcome barriers you might be experiencing with clubs, get back to the things that you loved or discover new things that you might love. And so I think that's something really important to champion and to kind of continuously remind, you know, both the sports sector but also those working with people with a disability that there is that connection there. And Padraig could probably speak better than I could, but yeah, there's something there really special.
Yeah, one of the survey findings from the Liberty survey I found, 94% of clubs believe they should cater to individuals with disabilities, but less than 3 in 10 have specified in their club charter or mission statement. I suppose just before we go to the break, and this is a touch point for the further discussion around solutions, but look, we all have views around capacity and that kind of thing. One thing you want to get out of this discussion today, one thing you want to get out of the participation space, say in a year's time or 5 years' time, what is the one thing you want to say to everybody, because this will be going out on the radio as well, about, you know, the great work you're doing and where you want to get to? If you were going to give a message to anybody, what would it be?
Education. If we can, if we can build capacity in the community, the programs, the accessibility will come. So I think the education is key. Also around national governing bodies, I think like funding, there's certainly funding around and required there with regards to, and dovetailing that in with culture. You know, Minister Rabbit touched on it earlier. It's all well and good having an inclusion officer, but whether it's an LSP or national governing body, there needs to be a culture of inclusion, whether it's participation, membership, competition. It needs to be across the organisation. In 30 years' time, Vision Sports Ireland or IWA Sport shouldn't exist. our members should be catered for within national governing bodies, whether it's athletics, cycling, basketball, whatever the case may be. So I guess there's a huge piece of work to be done in that regard to supporting people with disabilities to be fully embedded in national governing bodies of sport.
One thing you want to get out today?
I think increasing that idea of openness, for the sports sector especially, that if there's volunteers out there who are working in sport or coaching or whatever it might be, they're not expected to know everything about every disability and to know all the nuances of how to engage with people with a disability. But what we would ask them is to be open, to be empathetic, to engage in the conversation, to make those people feel welcome, to promote the fact that they're welcome. And when people come, just have conversations with them and ask them about what they'd expect, what they'd like. They understand their lives better than anybody else ever will. And so having that openness, I think, would be really good. And then the second thing is just connectivity. So I think the SIDOs are a good example. There's a number of specialist NGBs working in disability sport, trying to improve the linkages between those disability services that exist in sport. And it's great to see Anne Rabbit speaking earlier on and what's happening in other government departments and other areas. So that connectivity and then that openness, and promoting that openness.
Jack, you've been brilliantly open about your own experience. You've spoken to the Minister today. You've heard from everybody else so far. What's the one thing you want to get out of this in terms of moving forward?
Look, we've mentioned there are barriers and challenges, but there's a lot of good work that's happening as well, and it's important to say that as we speak, the ladies are playing down under in Australia. But if you think back a couple of years ago, there was the 2020 vision, and their tagline was, "If you can't see it, you can't be it." I'm very aware we have Vision Sports Ireland here, but the premise is the same. I think there's a lot to that. Showcasing, like we are today, the good things that are happening, the case studies that are working well, that just creates a pathway for more people to say, this has been done before, we can do it in our community, we can do it in our club. There are ways, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Awareness always precedes change, and getting that message out there and showcasing it in a slightly more public way, the good work that is being done, to me is the best way that we can give a pathway for it to be easier in the future for those that follow,
Health professional, non-executive director and speaker Jack Kavanagh, Padraig Healy, National Sports Development Officer with Vision Sports Ireland, and Benny Cullen, Director of Research and Innovation of Sport Ireland. Thank you so much for your excellent insights.
So yeah, I really appreciate the invite from Liberty here to host this panel, and I suppose look to the future on what we can do as sports clubs and sporting organisations for people with disabilities. So as reference, we've got an amazing panel and lineup here, who I definitely don't need to introduce. So yeah, I suppose Kevin, if I could start with you. You're not only an athlete, playing, blind football, you're also in charge of, the other side of administration and all that kind of stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about, I suppose, your experiences and maybe the challenges and hurdles you may have faced when you were getting involved in sport and your current career as well?
Thanks, Joanne. Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here at this very important discussion. So back in September 2001, when I was 14, I lost my sight due to retinal detachment. So that's 20-odd years ago, and that was a huge change in my life. And I very quickly got involved in my rehabilitative journey, but that was largely focused on independent living skills, education, getting back to school, exams, all of those things. But my life, the one thing that I missed out on was participation in sport. Prior to losing my sight, I used to play sports morning, noon and night. My mum struggled to get me in from some field or running or whatever it was, but all of that stopped for 10 years. And in September 2010, I saw a thing on Facebook about come and try blind football, and I thought, will I, won't I, will it be the same, so on and so forth. My girlfriend, my wife, pushed me into going. She said, we'll make a weekend out of it, we'll go to Tralee. So off we went. I got on that pitch. The amazing feelings, the feelings that I had been lost to me, just came back straight away. Out of that, I've made great friendships and have gone on to play for my country 8 times. Just been in the dressing room, all of that camaraderie has really helped me, and I think that's the main thing from my perspective that sport does for people. It really helps their well-being, self-confidence, and allows people to overcome some of the other challenges that are presented, unfortunately, in society for people with disabilities.
Yeah, I think it's an account I think that anyone can hear relate to. I think it's a mix of getting the confidence to actually ask to kind of go to one of these events and, you know, try out something new, potentially make a fool of yourself because you never know. And then, of course, building that confidence in because you're surrounded by people who look like you, understand, you know, your capabilities and stuff like that. Paul, if you wouldn't mind, I move on to you. You're obviously working in the Irish Wheelchair Association. You're a sailor as well. Feeling very under-accomplished right now. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience as well? You know, I suppose your disability is different. So yeah, what would your perspective be?
I suppose the journey was relatively similar. I was 17 years of age and kind of woke up out of a coma one day and was life changed in that month. And I suppose the journey was similar enough to Kevin. I kind of finding that place to fit back into. And you know, you work on getting the body right and fixing all the broken bits and stuff like that. But for me, there was a huge gap there. And again, I come from South Cork, hurling, boxing. I had a horse before I had a bike, so it was sports for me all my life. And I suppose, how do you get back into that journey? And I kind of got lost trying to get back into that journey. Initially, inclusion in the late 80s wasn't even a topic. So I suppose I struggled to get back in there and maybe just never quite fitting in with any group. I love a sport. Now I became a spectator, which I was 17 years of age being a spectator. And that impacted me hugely. So I suppose the initial breakthrough then to my own sport, it was probably out of boredom, out of stubbornness, and I started playing amputee football before it was the thing. And then we come from near the sea out there, so we got involved in Kinsale Yacht Club and ended up being lucky enough with a bit of a journey there at European Championships, World Championships, Paralympic Games. And one of my favourite moments is when I was retiring from Paralympics. I was one of the founders of that sailability program in Kinsale, so it was, and it's brilliant to see it featured today. But yeah, that was kind of my journey. Was it straightforward? Absolutely not. And it was. I think about myself because a lot of my members, or the members we'd have in OTB Sport, wouldn't have. So I had a very typical upbringing of being involved in sport and an expectation to be active, and that isn't always the case for kids with disabilities. And that's really where the gap is, I think.
Yeah, Paul, you might start working in media because it leads me very nicely on to Stephanie there. Stephanie, I suppose you work with Active Disability Ireland. You've undergone a rebrand, I think, so congratulations on everything so far. Ye give the clubs the charter and things that they need to do to kind of sign up for. I suppose we're just a bit curious about I'm not going to say what the charter is, but I suppose how it's been received and what the rollout has kind of been like. And have you noticed there are like specific things that clubs are like, look, we need help with X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, absolutely. And just for a bit of context setting, we were CARA Sport Inclusion Ireland, so that's what the rebrand has changed over to Active Disability Ireland. So some of you may have formerly known us as CARA. But yeah, so the Sports Inclusion Disability Charter, I guess for a bit of context setting, and I know it was maybe alluded to earlier, I know Minister Rabbit and Benny in Sport Ireland also kind of mentioned it, but it was developed back in 2018 and it came through a direct consultation that the organisation did with people with disabilities to try, I guess, better understand the barriers and challenges, and I know a lot of those have already been kind of discussed earlier today, but we wanted to really get, I guess, an idea from, you know, the voice of people with disabilities to get their perceptions on them, to understand a little bit more about how organisations can become more inclusive and in what ways they can do that. So I guess 5 kind of key themes or key kind of pillars as such emerged through that consultation process. And the Charter today, I guess, acts as a tool, as maybe nearly a starting point for clubs, for organisations, and not only in sport. I know we're talking about sports specifically today, but not only just in sport, but throughout other sectors as well. The Charter is quite adaptable in itself, that it gives 5 different objectives, 5 different headings, and 5 different kind of areas that organisations can work to improve to create more inclusive environments. To date, there's nearly 2,000 signatures. So again, all the LSPs, a lot of the NGBs, a lot of sporting organisations, clubs, even in that education sector and into the tourism sector as well too, we're seeing quite a lot of organisations begin to assign and adopt the Charter. So when somebody signs it on our website, they're automatically sent a library of resources and guidelines, a toolkit to help them incorporate inclusive practices into their organisation. And I guess the successes of that are beginning to be kind of seen. It's taken a while to get to where we are now in terms of the numbers, but we're almost at that 2,000 mark. And I guess maybe coinciding with the rebrand and the new name and kind of the buzz of that kind of reactivation, we're really kind of looking to really step forward with the Charter and to promote that out even more so.
Yeah, and it's encouraging that so many clubs are actually signing up for it and do want to change the model and change, I suppose, how they work and open themselves to be more reflective of the community they're probably based in. Kevin, I suppose I can come back to you for a moment. How the programs that ye offer in Vision Sports help overcome this idea that people with disabilities just stay in their house with carers and nurses all the time.
People with disabilities want the same rights and opportunities as everyone in society, and that's something that Vision Sports Ireland takes very seriously. Vision Sports Ireland joined the NCBI family of companies a couple of years ago now at this stage, and that has really helped to expand our reach out of Dublin and the East Coast right around the country, giving people sporting opportunities and giving people opportunities to be physically active, which is so very important. And it's all about choice, because it's not all about the Paralympics and playing for your country and all of those things. It's about going out, participating in your local park run, where Vision Sports have helped to provide guides, tandem cycling events all around the country, to name only 2, tennis. There's a wide array of sports being offered by Vision Sports and their partner organisations. I think it's in the region of 20 now. So choice is so very important, and I think that's something that we need to build on, and making sure that all of the mainstream sports are accessible to people. I would love to get back and play GAA growing up. I always dreamt of playing in Croke Park for Donegal. Probably wasn't that good, but you never know, because I know Vision Sports have recently started to engage with the GAA around developing a slitter with a rattle in it, for example, or a bell ball. So, there's lots of interesting things happening. So it's just very important that the government recognise that and provide the necessary funding to make it a reality.
Yeah, and I mean, we're even noticing sporting organisations are doing it. I know, I'm not just referencing it because nothing has happened, but for the Women's World Cup, they're rolling out for the first time that FIFA have launched an app for accessible commentary, not just for people in stadiums, but people at homes, and minor things like that. And I suppose using the power of technology can make an incredible difference, for situations as well. Paul, I suppose, you mentioned obviously developing the sailing program, with children and stuff like that. And Kevin had mentioned how important it is to get children involved, not only actually probably doing the sport, but in other ways. I'm a writer because I'm lazy. I'd like to say it's because I have no limbs. It's because I'm lazy. So, I suppose you're probably encountering children who probably might necessarily not want to actually sail, but they just want to be on the water having the crack with all their friends.
Absolutely. I suppose the medical model versus a social model that you mentioned a while ago, that is the huge barrier. Our kids with disabilities aren't actually playing. They're not actually, Minister Rabbit spoke about the swing in the playground. That's not for them. Kids with disabilities don't play. Mm-hmm. And they're being wrapped up and they're being minded and stuff like that. So the barrier to get sailing or to get playing basketball or to running or whatever it is, it starts way before that. It's the whole culture and mindset, absolutely, pre that. So actually, invariably, what happens is we don't see these kids coming to go sailing or play wheelchair basketball or vision impaired football, whatever it is, because they're in this cosseted world. And how do you break that down? And I suppose it goes back to the medical profession. Clearly made the point that the medical profession saved their life. Absolutely, it does. But it then has to hand over to the community. And I suppose there's a kind of disconnect between, we talk about the disabled community sometimes, it's just the community. And we haven't really engaged in it as of yet. So, and these barriers, I see funding coming up quite a lot as an issue. And I think, to be fair, it's a bit of a cop-out. If there's absolutely a will there will be a way to find money, to find resources, to find whatever you need. But the will isn't there. And I think it falls back around the expectation of these kids. People expect less from people with disabilities. And maybe not in this room, but in our society, that's kind of what happens.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if you've ever been to a wheelchair hurling match, like they curse the referee.
Yeah.
They're kids, like they literally like curse out the referee and they're swinging hurleys at each other, you know. I took my friend there, she came over from England and she was like, oh, we're going to like a wheelchair thing. And I was like, yeah. She expected it to be like, I mean, she's met me, so I don't know why I expected it to be nice. And next thing, she just saw them swinging for each other. One, she was impressed because hurling, and two, like they were in wheelchairs. And then a boy came over to her and he was like, I'm already paralysed, so like it doesn't matter. She was like, what do you even, like, how do you even respond to that? I was like, you just say, well done. Stephanie, I suppose you're seeing it as well, kind of time and time again, like all these experiences, and you know, we reference, kids overcoming our expectations of them, I suppose, more than anything. You've developed a toolkit for clubs, which I'm sure clubs are probably looking to you going, okay, we have them, but like, what do we do with them?
Yeah.
So what would you, advice-wise, what would you say to clubs to just give it a go and see what happens, or what?
Absolutely, yeah. I guess the toolkit Joanne's referring to is one that we launched at the end of last year. It's an accessible club toolkit, and I guess it kind of ties in a little bit of the work that we were doing with the charter and kind of really brings those 5 key principles to life that we mentioned earlier. I guess it's a resource that's there and available to clubs. It's not sport specific, and it's kind of open for anybody to download on the website. But it's available there for clubs to develop or improve, embed and sustain inclusive practices. And it's a really guided, structured way to be able to do that. And it is the question that we often as an organisation get asked quite frequently, where do we start, what do we do? And it is that kind of guideline as such that kind of bring people to, I guess, a stage approach like that to kind of create those inclusive environments. It's not always an easy thing to do. I know with the likes of the club structures, they're often volunteer-led and capacity in people, and sometimes there's often a barrier in itself. But maybe to kind of highlight the fact that sometimes it is just you need that one person with that real buy-in, and if there's one person that's the driving force in a club that wants to create that inclusive environment, it really opens up opportunities for more and more people to get involved. So the toolkit is a fantastic way to be able to do that, and it's supplemented with guidelines and resources and additional kind of information to be able to support people even more so. But it's certainly a way that we're seeing quite valuable ways to create those opportunities at the club level, but we do rely quite heavily on our kind of network of LSPs and NGBs to promote that to the ground, because our agencies as such don't really kind of work in that direct capacity approach. So it's kind of a filtered approach, and trying to hope that the information that the NGBs and LSPs share right down through that network will kind of eventually reach people on the ground to really have that impact.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredibly important to advise. I suppose one stat we have here is that 33% of clubs cite a lack of available training for volunteers. Ireland just got a free kick there and they missed, so that's fine. There's 6 minutes left in the game. But yeah, I suppose 33%, like that's a high number, Kevin. So people are coming to us being like, as a volunteer, like, what do I do? Like, my advice would be just ask the person what they need. Would you have a similar feeling towards that, or are there things volunteers can do to make it more comfortable for the child or adult or whoever it may be to just approach them and be like, look, I might need a bit of help with this?
Ask is the key word, because none of this is rocket science, and I think sometimes people get hung up and they're afraid of offending people asking the wrong question, but people just want to be involved, to feel included, and the only way that you can do that is by asking the question what support you need to facilitate your dream of playing sport and being physically active. So, I mean, there's lots of resources available across the sector. Vision Sports has lots of guides around guide running and physical activity and how to include people in sports throughout the nation. So it's really vital that people ask, and if you ask, if you don't know, you ask, you'll get the answer, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I suppose, Kevin, your disability, people, it mightn't be very visible, aside from your lovely dog who's next to you. Whereas, for myself and Paul, like it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's similar for you, like people tiptoeing around you. What advice would you have for people who are kind of tiptoeing because they don't want to approach? I mean, literally, if you met my dad, the first thing he'd ask you is about the biomechanical engineering of your leg, and all bets are out the window there anyway. Offence is not something in our eyes. Is it the same for you?
Absolutely, and I could just about tell him it's waterproof and that's it. But
it's very handy to be waterproof.
Very handy to be waterproof. I suppose there's an element of responsibility on me to make that journey easy for the outsider to come in as well. And so if you want to talk about my disability, I think I have a responsibility to talk about it, because it just makes it easier for the next person up the road. But it is, people tiptoe around it. I spoke to Jared about a test I do with people and I won't do it today, but I asked them, I'm in shorts and I'm smiling at them, and I say, you can't offend me because I'm from Ballygarvan, which can't be politically correct. so I say, what's my disability? And the number of hands that will go up when I ask them that are nil, because people are afraid to say the wrong thing. They're afraid to offend. They're afraid to just look a little silly. And just don't want to be in that awkward situation, where there's nothing awkward about it. Kids do it all the time. Kids will come up to you in the supermarket and they say, Jesus, that's a cool chair, what the hell? Where are your legs? Where are you hiding them?
I've been asked if it's a Fiat and a Range Rover.
Somewhere in between.
It's a Honda.
Yeah. But I suppose we have to make it easy for people. That's our responsibility as well. And this nervousness, I suppose, what's wrong with disability?
Yeah.
For you, for me, for Kevin, for anyone else, there's nothing wrong with it. I actually listened to Jack's podcast a couple of days ago, and I heard he was going to be on here, and he was talking about his life changing positively, and that's the way it's following a disability. It's the exact same experience for me. It's not something you select to do, but but we have this view that there's something wrong with disability. It's just different. And everybody in this room, regardless of whether they're physically able or not, have something going on in their lives that's causing them grief.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think as well, it's people with disabilities are a bit more innovative than what people expect. I started an office recently at a law firm, and one of them was like, can you write a report? And I was like, I work in media, like report writing is kind of my job. And they were like, but like how quickly can you type? And I was like, I can do 800 words in 20 minutes. They were like, oh. I was like, yeah. I was like, so I'm kind of handy, but you wouldn't really know it because I have no limbs, but that's okay. Stephanie, I suppose last question to you in terms of for clubs who are looking for resources. Your organisation provides obviously a lot of resources. What can guide us, I suppose, on where we can go in terms of trying to figure out what we can do next for our clubs to be more accessible for people with disabilities?
Yeah, I think if anybody wants to get involved with a sporting club, the first thing they're going to look for is information. Generally, that information's on websites and social media accounts, whatever, and even just making that accessible, I think, is really important. Access to information and that digital accessibility piece, I think, is paramount. Knowledge is power, and information is powerful. So people having access to that and knowing when the sessions are happening, when they're on, what's happening, the times, the locations, that there's positive, inclusive imagery of people with disabilities represented on these platforms as well too. A picture speaks 1,000 words. You don't need to say it in writing if there's an image of somebody participating in that sport. A parent or somebody, a carer or somebody with a disability themselves can already know that club's inclusive, I'm welcome here. I think it was mentioned earlier that sometimes people are not sure if they're welcome down or whatever that. I can guarantee you that any single club that you'd approach, they'd be welcome people with open arms. And I think just that that representation, that promotion, that visibility, and actually profiling, even some of the great stories and case studies we've seen here today on those videos, like having those profiled, having those available on websites and on social media and really kind of promoted across really speaks volumes, and really kind of opens up the doors for people.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose really that's the end of our panel discussion. I think one thing we've all taken away is just ask, be confident, don't be afraid to say the wrong thing. We've probably heard it already. And I suppose, just open your arms and see what happens, and it's a world of possibilities, and not just to focus on playing, but also in terms of administration, volunteers, different things like that. Get the kid with Down syndrome to hand out water maybe at halftime. Get the girl in a wheelchair to write a report, not me. There's a whole rake of things, that can possibly be done. So just want to give thanks to our panel again. Really do appreciate your insights and your time.
Thank you.
And I think Ireland have lost officially, so we can all cry about that, but it's okay. Liberty are here to cheer us up. So thanks very much, and I appreciate your help, appreciate your insights.
Thanks, Ron.